In this video, we're going to look at commanding. And commanding is an input mechanism in Windows Presentation Foundation, which provides input handling at a more semantic level than device input. Examples of commands are the copy, cut, and paste operations found on many applications. Okay, so these would be things that you usually see in your apps, and this is something that you can specify that it will be available inside of your application that you're building. So what are commands? Well, commands have several purposes. The first purpose is to separate the semantics and the object that invokes a command from the logic that executes the command, which is something that you very often want. So you want to separate your UI, so to speak, from the code that will be executed, the code behind. And commands basically allow you to do that. This allows for multiple and disparate sources to invoke the same command logic, and it allows the command logic to be customized for different targets. For example, the editing operations copy, cut, and paste, which are found in many applications, can be invoked by using different user actions if they are implemented by using commands. So what you could do is potentially use the copy command for one thing in one particular context and something else in a different context. Okay, so when using my editing software that I have here, when I copy a piece of my video track, it will do something else than when I copy an entire video track, for example. Okay. All right, so that is something that you can do, and the cool thing is you can even use key combinations using Control X, for example, to cut something, and then Control V to paste something, and these are handled by commands, so you don't need to build this shortcut manually inside of your application. You can really just use commands. And in this video, we're going to use the close command, and then later we are going to see some other commands as well. Therefore, I have this project here, and I have a stack panel with just one button that I'm going to put in here. Okay, and the button will use such a command. It will use the application commands.close. And let me make this window a little smaller so that we can actually see the button in there, because it's actually quite small. We could change the width and height to something like 100 each so that we can actually see the button a little more. Okay, and now the interesting part is now the command bindings that you can use. So you can bind a command to a particular context of your application. In this case, you can bind it to a particular UI element. Okay, so here I can use the window dot command bindings, and here plural command bindings, in order to now create a command binding in there. Okay, and this command binding will then be available throughout my entire window and its children. So whatever I'm adding here, for example, in my case, it will be the close command. I can use this command throughout my entire Windows children. And here it's not window, but window, like so. Okay, and here now you can define a command binding, and this command binding needs to have a couple of properties. The first one being the command itself. So you need to define which command do you want to execute. And I'm going to execute application commands.close. Okay, so here you use application commands and then dot and whatever application command you want to use. So there is also cut, there's paste, and so forth. And here you need to define the executed event. I'm going to create a new event handler for that, and the can execute event. And here I'm also going to create a new event handler. Okay, and you can see that the button will now execute this command. So it will also execute this close command. So this button doesn't have a click event or anything like that, but it will just run a particular command, which will be the close command. Now let's go to the code behind, because that's where the magic happens. So you have this method called can execute, and this method is also an event, but what it needs to know is whether it can execute or not. So you can say can execute should be true for that particular rooted event args. So E can execute will now allow this event to be executed, which means this command to be executed. If you set that to false, then it will not work. So you can deactivate it using false here. Now, the interesting thing is what shall happen once we execute the command. Okay, so once the close command will be executed, and here we can override whatever the functionality would be that we want to achieve when this command is run. So I'm just going to say this.close. What that will do is it will close our main window. And then I'm going to show a message box, which will just say close command was invoked. Okay, that's it. Nothing more. And now let's run our application to actually see this in action. So here we have our close button. And now once I click this button, the window will be closed and my message box will appear. Close command was invoked. Okay, so now I can basically manually define whatever should happen once this close command is invoked. And we can use it throughout our application. We can use this command. Now this is just one example of a command. There is an entire command library that you can use. Okay, there are application commands, navigation commands, media commands, editing commands, and so forth. Okay, so application commands, for example, would be close, copy, cut, delete, find, help, new. You see a bunch of default commands, such as print, for example. So if you want the user to be able to print whatever you display in the screen, you could use the print command. So you would just use application commands print, like here. Okay, so you would just use print here instead. And here, once we click on the button, we will just say print. And instead of closing, we would just say here print command was invoked. Let's run this real quick. Actually, let's rename this to print as well. Let's run this real quick. And then what you can test is using Control P. Okay, and Control P will call this print command. So I never click this button. Let me go with the mouse next to the view and then press Control P, and it still is invoked. When I click on the button, it's also invoked. Okay, so you can just basically reuse commands throughout your application. And well, as I just showed you, these are the default commands here that are super useful. But of course, there are other commands as well, like navigation commands here, like first page, go to page, increase zoom, refresh the page, and so forth. So if you want to use the default functionality there as well, you can easily do so. Instead of using application commands, you would use navigation commands as the keyword here. So here at this point, and then whatever command you want to execute. And then the cool thing is you can also create custom commands. So whatever rooted command that you want to build or rooted UI command, you can just follow the instructions that you have here from this WPF samples.